Welcome back to Gaelic Games Fan TV. Cuala are All-Ireland champions for the very first time in their history, at least at senior level in football. Anyway, they obviously have won a couple of All-Irelands in hurling, but oh my goodness me. What a game. What a game. What an absolute spectacle of Gaelic football. And don't get me wrong, in the first half, it was very, very one-sided. Cuala were very, very dominant. They led by 14 points. But that second half was absolutely brilliant. It had absolutely everything. Red cards, drama, brilliant points, extraordinary goals. Absolutely brilliant. And fair play to Errigal Kieran. Look, 14 points down at one stage, 12 points down at half time. Genuinely, it looked like it was over. And look, they didn't win the game. Obviously, they still went on to lose. But it looked like this was going to be one of the most lopsided, one-sided All-Ireland finals in recent memory, in my opinion. I can't... especially at club level anyway, like this was an absolute domination from Cuala. They were ripping through Errigal Kieran, tearing them inside and out, racing forward, causing all sorts of havoc, scoring goals. And Errigal just could not deal with it at all. They couldn't get their big players into the game. They couldn't get the Canavans into the game. They couldn't get Peter Hart into the game, who, by the way, second half, absolutely extraordinary stuff from him. Padraig Byrne causing damage. Cal Doran, Peter Duffy, I thought was outstanding for Cuala. And obviously Con O'Callaghan certainly played his part as well, scoring 5 points and getting that vital block actually by right at the death as well, which was absolutely incredible to see. But wow, Errigal Kieran came roaring back in the second half, roaring back, showed tremendous spirit, tremendous fight. They got it down to a 3-point deficit at one point. So they reduced it from a 14-point deficit to 3 points. But it was just a bridge too far, unfortunately, from their point of view. But look, in the end, Cuala did enough. I think they only scored about 5 points in the second half, but they had built up so much of a lead and so much of a buffer that it was too hard for Errigal to come back into the game. But an extraordinary game of football in the end. Who said Gaelic football needs changing? Look, it probably does, to be fair. But, in terms of this game, I just really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was very, very entertaining. Some brilliant football from both teams. And an absolute spectacle of an All-Ireland final. And definitely one of the best All-Ireland finals in football anyway, about county or club level that I can remember for quite some time. So, fair play to both teams. But let's dissect the game, break it down. First half, I just thought it was very similar to the hurling final. Errigal Kieran just couldn't really get into the game. Their sharpness seemed off. They kept going long on kickouts, and Cuala were just gobbling them up, whether it was Mick Fitzsimons or Peter Duffy. It was just light work for Cuala. And Errigal just couldn't get their big players into the game. They couldn't get, Darragh Canavan into the game, who obviously went off after 20 minutes. And we're obviously hoping everything's all good with him. Rory Canavan as well. They couldn't really get him into the game either as well in the first half. And Errigal were struggling. They were just struggling to get their feet on the ball to put a couple of passes together. Cuala were pressing up very high in their kickouts, and they just kept turning them over, and they were just cutting through them like a warm knife through butter. Do you know what I mean? It was very, very simple for Cuala. And Cal Doran gets a goal. Padraig Byrne gets a goal as well. David O'Dowd getting a goal. They were just absolutely ripping through Errigal Kieran time and time again. And there was one period from from the start of the game, at one stage, the scoreline, I think it was something like 2-6 or like 3-6 or something like that to a point. It was absolutely wild. The scoreline that was there. And you just thought, like, at that stage, it's over. Like a 14-point lead in a game of football. Cuala are probably going to sit back, absorb pressure, keep the ball, take the sting out of it. And you just thought, yes, Errigal Kieran will come out in the second half and fight and get that deficit down. They reduced it to 12 before the end of the half. And you knew Errigal Kieran were going to come out all guns blazing, and Enda McGinley was going to lay into them, and they were going to come flying out of traps in the second half. But to reduce the lead, and what was actually more interesting was, with 20 minutes to go, it was actually a 6-point game. So in the opening 10 minutes of that second half, they completely tore into Cuala, ripped them to shreds. Peter Hart, phenomenal. Rory Canavan, very good. Tommy Canavan, very good, it must be said as well. And that goal by Peter Hart, I mean, oh my goodness gracious. I mean, have we ever seen a better goal in an All-Ireland final than that? Someone tweeted me just before we went live saying that it wasn't meant to be. Or no, not that it was not meant to be. That he didn't mean it. He didn't mean to go for the goal. Look at it again, the power that he gets on that. Do you know what I mean? Like, why would you get so much power on a shot like that when you're going for a point? So for me, I think he did go for the goal. I think he did. And Errigal Kieran needed goals. You know, they probably needed another goal, if we're being honest, and obviously had a few kind of half chances to get that, in fairness. But it was extraordinary from Errigal Kieran in the second half. And even looking at it, you know, Peter Hart scoring 1-2, got sent off towards the end as well. I think the substitutes made it a big impact when they came on. And they just pinned Cuala back. And Cuala just, they definitely did start to panic ever so slightly. Started giving the ball away a little bit more. Probably sat in a bit too much. And that sort of allowed Errigal Kieran to put the pressure on. But definitely in the last 10 minutes, they did calm it down. They were keeping the ball a lot more. I think Errigal Kieran started to tire a little bit more as well. And Cuala hung on. They hung on. They obviously get that point right at the death as well from Conor Groarke, I think it was. And then Peter Hart gets sent off like a couple of minutes later. But yeah, absolutely extraordinary stuff. Charlie says, put the club finals back on St. Patrick's Day. Yeah, look, I wouldn't be opposed to that, but look, I enjoyed that today, in fairness. I was always never sure about the finals, like in early January, just because, you know, teams obviously have breaks over Christmas. And I know, like in this case, you have a semi-final last week. So the teams are coming in with a bit of momentum. But the hurling, for example, you know, like Stars just looked completely dead. You know, and I think having that bit of a 2-3 week break, especially with Christmas in between, when obviously there isn't going to be a huge amount of training, you know, I think it's probably a little bit unfair. But look, it's a conversation for another day. John Mack says here it was over after 15 minutes. It was, to be fair. But look, Errigal came back into it. They made a game out of it. With a bit more luck and everything else, they might have maybe came back into the game. But I think if you are Enda McGinley, if you are an Errigal Kieran fan, you probably are looking at it and thinking, why were we so poor to begin with? Why were we cut open time and time again? And I know Cuala kind of, you know, they sat off a lot more in the second half, so they didn't really play the same way that they did in the first. So it's hard to know if they had to play, you know, and even at that, they still cut through Errigal a few times and had a few half goal chances. Even that point at the end from Groarke, like he could have went for a goal there, if we're being honest. But he obviously puts it over the bar, gets the insurance point, takes no chances. Gavin says, could see a lot of these Cuala players on the Dublin team. Yeah, do you know, like one player who really stood out, and I remember seeing him in the O'Byrne Cup last year, and I remember thinking he's a player, and I think I might have mentioned it in a podcast or two, but one player that I thought was going to get a chance a lot more was Peter Duffy. And he never really got a chance last year. I think with Fenton not there, McCarthy. Look, obviously, you'd be surprised to see them line out, you know, like that. You'd be surprised to see Peter Duffy or Patrick O'Cuffik-Byrne line out against Mayo next week. I think that would be a bit madness from Desi Farrell. But I think Peter Duffy could come in there. I think he's definitely got the tools to play in midfield. He's tall, like he's got that fielding of the ball in terms of catching the ball. So he's got the height there. He's pacey as well. I think he has to come into the team, in my opinion. He definitely deserves a chance, especially with some of the, you know, players leaving in midfield. So, yeah, I definitely like to see him come in. Patrick O'Cuffik-Byrne, obviously, you want to see him get a bit more time. You know, it's hard to know like who else would really come in. I mean, David O'Dowd had a very good game as well from wing back, scored 1-1, but I think we're fairly fine in that position. And yeah, there we go. What a crazy game. Gavin says a lot of silly passes by Errigal cost them. They could have got back into the game even further. Yeah, they just, like, you know, it was a bad deficit when it was 8 or 9 points, but when it goes to 10, 11, and then it goes to 14, you're thinking like this is you know, there's no way they're going to get back into this. Even if they, you know, the best case scenario was nearly what they did in terms of actually making it a game and bringing it down, you know, finish as a 4-point game. They had it down to 3 at one stage. So, yeah, crazy game of football. Yeah, that's what we love about Gaelic football, in fairness. And I think after, you know, the Errigal Crokes game was very good. The Cuala Strandhill game, not so much. So great to see a game of Gaelic football that was actually very, very entertaining. And it's the last game we'll watch as well for, you know, who knows, you know, for how long, we don't know, in this sort of old format in terms of the new rules obviously coming into the league. So we'll see kind of how that kind of you know, makes the league look and everything else. But yeah, massive congratulations to Cuala. A great day for Dublin GA, it must be said. Cuala winning the All-Ireland in football, Na Fianna winning the All-Ireland in hurling as well. Cuala become actually the first club from Dublin, and I believe the second club ever to win All-Irelands in both football and hurling at senior level. I think Finbars were the other one from Cork, but correct me if I'm wrong on that. So extraordinary achievement for them. Na Fianna, look, I mean, they have a very good football team as well. So who knows, maybe they can, you know, and a lot of people would have actually expected them to be the team to actually get past Kilmacud Crokes. You know, they were looking like one of the closest teams for a few years, you know, in football. But Cuala are the ones who did it, and they've gone all the way. I didn't see it coming personally. I actually predicted Errigal to win this game. And I didn't think they would be as poor as that in the first half. So, yeah, extraordinary stuff. In terms of man of the match, tough one, really. Like, a lot of very, very good players. And it was a game of two halves, really, wasn't it? I mean, Peter Hart was outstanding in the second half for Errigal Kieran. Peter Duffy was brilliant for Cuala. You could look at Con as well, who got that block on one of the Errigal Kieran substitutes. I think it might have been Mark Kavanagh, maybe. But that was a brilliant block, like, towards the end of the game, when, you know, when you're having your corner forward, number 15, back in a defensive position, blocking those chances, which, to be fair, we probably won't see, because, you know, in the new rules, Con would have to be left up top. Do you know what I mean? So he'd have to be, you know, he obviously can't come back in that scenario. So that'll be interesting to see. But yeah, extraordinary for Cuala. Congratulations to them. Congratulations to Na Fianna as well. Both very good games. The first game, the hurling final, was definitely a lot more one-sided, and SARS didn't really come back into that. Na Fianna always had that game under control. And although, like, as a Dublin man, although I'm not a Cuala man necessarily, you want to see Dublin clubs do well, so I'm happy to see them win it. But I am also happy to see Errigal Kieran make a game out of it in the second half, because, you know, another lopsided, one-sided final. Yeah, you know, you don't want to see that. You want to see a bit of entertainment, and to be fair, we did get that. So, you know what, I'm going to go with David O'Dowd as man of the match. 1-1 in total, and an extraordinary performance from wing back, in fairness. So let me know your thoughts, your opinions on the game. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. We'll be dropping plenty of match reactions over the course of the league as well. And plenty more content and everything else to come. So, yeah, cheers anyone who tuned in, and we'll speak to you all soon.